What's up everybody, I'm HoopsandHipHop. So it seems like every time a brand new Pokemon game comes around, a lot of people like to talk about how this Pokemon game has the opportunity to be the best Pokemon game ever. It's a conversation that comes up literally every time a new generation or game comes around, and it's something I myself have even done, and I did last generation with Pokemon Sun and Moon. However, even though it didn't unfortunately end up quite that way for Sun and Moon, I believe the scenario is a little bit different with Sword and Shield. During the Pokemon Direct when Pokemon Sword and Shield was first revealed, the director of the game, Shigeru Ohmori, specifically stated that Game Freak is looking to make these Pokemon games the best Pokemon games ever. Now, granted, it's reasonable that they probably want to make every Pokemon game the best game ever, but the fact that they said it specifically in this presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they've ever kind of come out and said this directly to the fans, leads me to believe that it's going to be a bit more of a focus for the Game Freak development team, and they're really going to try hard to actually make this the best Pokemon game we've ever seen. And so because of this, I'm here today to talk to you guys about how Game Freak can make Pokemon Sword and Shield the best Pokemon games ever in just 5 easy steps. Now, this is not going to be a wish list type of video. Instead, it's going to have a little bit of a twist to it. All 5 things I'm going to be discussing in this video are things that Game Freak could very easily implement into the game, so it's not asking too much in any case, but they're all 5 things that are very vital to having an excellent Pokemon game, and they're basically things that you would have to have in the best Pokemon game of all time, but they're also very, very easily attainable, hence the 5 easy steps. And I'm not saying that the greatest Pokemon game of all time only has to have these 5 things, but if Pokemon Sword and Shield did have all 5 of these things, it would go a very long way and would essentially, for the most part, make Pokemon Sword and Shield one of, if not the greatest Pokemon game of all time. So without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and just find out what these things are. Alright, the first thing we're going to be talking about in this video is a good-sized post-game. Now, you might think with a broad term like good-sized post-game that it's a little bit easier said and done, but in all reality, if Game Freak just puts in a little effort, this is something that can be very, very easily obtained. And the reason why it can be very easily obtained is because it doesn't really have to be one thing in particular. Obviously, as I have said before, I would love to have a post-game where you travel to a second region, but it's not something that's required, in my opinion, to have the best Pokemon game. We just need something of a second quest, if you will, that is around the 10-ish plus hours mark that actually gives us some substantial content to look forward to once we beat the main story. I believe that the Pokemon games have been headed in this right direction recently, with things like the Delta episode in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and the Team Rainbow Rocket episode in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but at the same time, the post-games of all recent Pokemon games have not been perfect, and I think if they are going to make Pokemon Sword and Shield the greatest Pokemon game ever, it's gotta have a robust post-game, and with the fact that it's on the Switch and the Switch is capable of so much more and can hold such a bigger size game within that small cartridge, I don't think there's really any excuse whatsoever for this not to happen, especially because, like I said, I'm not being picky. The post game can be anything as long as it is like quest-based, story-based in that realm, and it lasts 10 plus hours. I think if they fit those 2 criteria, we're in for an excellent treat in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now, if we want to talk about easy, this is probably one of the easiest things that Game Freak can do to push towards the mantle of greatest Pokemon game ever for Sword and Shield, and that would be bringing back the PSS. Now, I'm not the type of guy that plays Pokemon online. In fact, I seldom ever play it online outside of a couple select trades and battles with friends, but even I can tell that the PSS was brilliantly simple and easy to use, whereas the Festival Plaza in Generation 7 was just a heaping pile of crap. It's been said about 1,000,000 times before, but everything about the Festival Plaza was just so unnecessarily complicated, and it literally took everything about the PSS that was good in terms of being simple, easy to use, and just quick to get into trades and battles with your friends, and just did the exact opposite. So if Pokemon Sword and Shield wants to be the best Pokemon game ever, it's gotta have an online functionality that is quick to use, that is easy to use, and that is most importantly, fun to use. The Festival Plaza was none of those things, and the PSS was all of those things. So if they bring back the PSS, they don't even need to spend time coming up with another online interface. They can just bring that back, and boom, we've got a quick, easy way to get online, and that is a big step in the right direction for making Pokemon Sword and Shield the greatest Pokemon games ever. Now, I literally just mentioned how bringing back the PSS was probably one of the easiest things Pokemon could do to help make Sword and Shield the greatest Pokemon games ever, but if there's one thing they can do that is even easier, that would be introducing a free 3D camera into these games. Now, compared to the other selections on this list, this is a little bit of a dark horse pick, but I sincerely believe if they want Pokemon Sword and Shield to be the greatest Pokemon games ever and to be considered that by the majority of the fan base, they have got to have a 3D camera in this game. And the simple reason for that is there's simply no reason not to. A, this is the 21st century. B, we live in 2019. Those are kind of the same points, but stay with me here. C, this game is on the Nintendo Switch. And D, this is a 3D game. There's literally no reason whatsoever, stylistically, graphically, or otherwise, that this game cannot have a 3D camera. And the reason why this is so important to help Pokemon Sword and Shield become the greatest Pokemon games ever is because it's something that just shows a certain amount of effort on the part of Game Freak. Introducing something that would be monumental for the Pokemon franchise, yet is literally standard in almost every other 3D franchise ever, just shows that they want Pokemon to improve, they want it to keep moving forward, and improving both technologically and from a gameplay perspective as well. And even though it's really simple, it does make a big difference in the gameplay, and it also makes a big difference in the minds of gamers as well. Yes, the game can still be great without one, but the fact that it is so simple to implement in a game like this would just bar it or hold it from being the greatest Pokemon game ever, in my mind, if they didn't have it. Because in order to have the greatest Pokemon game ever, you have got to go the extra mile, and including something like this would be an example of Game Freak going the extra mile, and if they don't do it, then they didn't do what they needed to do in terms of the effort to make this game the greatest game ever. Okay, so the fourth item on my list is a little bit more ambiguous, but at the same time it would still be insanely easy for Game Freak to implement, and that would be allowing for the return of fan favorite features such as Mega Evolution, such as regional variants, and even the return of riding Pokemon and Pokemon following behind you. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that they would have to have all of these come back, because I feel if they had them all coming back and they introduced new things from all of them at the same time, that might make things a little bit busy. So I'm not going to hold them to that high of a standard because I don't think it's necessary, but I think they need to bring back at least one of these three features if they want people to take it seriously as possibly the greatest game ever. We all know that Game Freak has the philosophy of introducing new features into every game, but making them exclusive to that game in order to give that game some value when it eventually becomes old and outdated, so people still have a reason to go back and play it. But at this point, this idea and this philosophy is doing more harm than good. At this point, I don't think it really makes any difference to fans whatsoever in terms of the quality of a game if it has some exclusive feature that all of the other games don't have, and instead I think at this point, fans are just fed up with getting great feature after great feature after great feature, but then it never coming back. The opportunity to build upon these features and expand them in the next game and therefore improve the quality of the series overall is monumental, yet it has been completely ignored by Game Freak and has been for almost the entire time that the franchise has been around. When it comes right down to it, you can't exactly have a fan favorite game, aka the best Pokemon game ever, if it does not have fan favorite features included within it. And I think even if you just had a few Mega Evolutions or a few regional variants, just sprinkle them in there, not necessarily make them the billboard poster child of the game, that would still go a long way in the minds of fans in once again showing the effort on the part of Game Freak to give fans what they really want. So Game Freak, I will give you your pick of the litter on this one. You don't necessarily have to have all three of these in Sword and Shield, but I think if you want to impress the fans to the point where they're calling this the best game ever, you gotta have at least one. And finally, speaking of fan favorite features, the last thing that Pokemon Sword and Shield needs to really be the best game ever is its own brand new groundbreaking feature. Now this one, much like the first point on my list, might seem like it's a little bit broad in terms of its scope, so it might seem like it's a little bit easier said than done. But if Game Freak has showed us anything in the past 2 generations, it's that they know how to introduce a brand new feature into Pokemon games that A, doesn't really change too much and is overall a simple concept, but B, almost immediately becomes a fan favorite feature. Obviously, in Generation 6, we had Mega Evolutions, which essentially just gave evolutions to fully evolved Pokemon that increased their stats. Overall, a pretty simple concept, but it caught on very quickly. Then in Generation 7, we got Alola forms, which was the case of Pokemon basically adapting to their environments, which changed their types. Once again, another simple concept that caught on very quickly. So even though I can't really pinpoint what exactly Game Freak could do in terms of introducing a brand new feature that would make these games the best ever, I think it's obviously essential that they have something along the lines of a Mega Evolution or an Alolan form to really make this game stand out amongst all of the rest that also have great features in and of themselves. And to a certain extent, we already know that Pokemon Sword and Shield are going to have a new feature. We know it revolves around that weird stadium emblem that we've seen in the trailer and the Japanese logos, and we know that it has something to do with the new stadium-like gyms, but as far as what the feature is exactly, we're just going to have to wait and see. But it is super important that this feature falls in line with Mega Evolutions and Alolan forms, and not so much something like Z moves, because Z moves essentially were a step back from Mega Evolution. They did much the same thing, but weren't as cool. This particular feature cannot do that. It can't attempt to piggyback off of something else, and it especially cannot be a watered down version of another feature we've already had. It's gotta be new, it's gotta be exciting, and while it doesn't need to be complicated, it really needs to stand out and be something that fans can really get behind and enjoy a lot. And there we have it, everybody. Those were 5 easy steps that Pokemon Sword and Shield can take to ensure that they become the greatest Pokemon games ever. Now, I'm sure that you guys are hoping as well as I am that these games do indeed become the greatest Pokemon games, and I'm sure there's many specific things that you yourself are hoping to see. So if there is something in particular you're wanting to see included in these games, definitely leave it in a comment below. I would love to hear it. And if you did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like to show your support, because it really helps out. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more new Pokemon content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, including plenty of Pokemon Sword and Shield coverage. And last but not least, if you enjoy the channel and you enjoy Pokemon music and remixes, consider following me on Spotify, because not only is that greatly appreciated, but it is also one of the easiest ways to directly support the channel outside of just watching videos. So if you like what you see here and you want to continue to enjoy stuff into the future, listening to my stuff on Spotify is a great way to help me do that. With all of that being said though, I will be back on Thursday for another video, so be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified as soon as it goes live. And with all that being said, I love you guys, and I will smell you guys later.